and welcome to the Historian's Hut. Today, I want to talk about one of the weirdest, most odd, most bizarre figures from history, and his name is Publius Clodius Pulcher. But for ease and time, let's just call him Claudius. This guy lived in the 1st century BCE in Rome, one of the most tumultuous, well-documented times of history. And it's amazing that he even stood out, that he was even written down in history, because just think of all the people, think of all these big names that most people know. You have Sulla, you have Caesar, Pompey, Crassus, you've got Cleopatra, Mark Antony, Augustus, you've got Vercingetorix, Mithridates, all these crazily well-known people. But in the background, in the footnote, there's this person named Publius Clodius Pulcher, who was, you could say, a henchman, a hired hand, a goon, a thug, in the employ of Julius Caesar, or at least for the most part. This relationship between Claudius and Caesar, it was mainly before, or not mainly, it was before the Civil War, the time where Caesar was away in Spain and in Gaul, trying to keep the politicians in Rome from totally undermining him. And the same with Crassus and Pompey. They were kept in check by this Claudius figure. But the way these two people met, the way Caesar and Claudius met, is just weird. It's just out of this world. It all began on a certain night in 62 BCE when the festival of the Bona, or the good goddess, also sometimes known as Fauna, but no one knows for sure if that's who the good goddess was. But it was on a festival night of the good goddess, and you have to understand that this festival was very sacred, very religiously significant. It was, you couldn't break any of these rules because they were that important. To get a scale of how important this festival, this celebration was, it was held at the palace of the Pontifex Maximus, who was one of it's hard to tell, probably the most important priest of Rome. Also in attendance, one of the hostesses of this celebration were also the Vestal Virgins, the most popular, most famous, most remembered of the female priesthoods, the priestesses of Rome. But most important, this festival was a woman's only celebration. It was sacrilege for a man to be there. And there was no instance where a man should be there. So if a man was there, then just all hell would break loose. So that cues Publius Clodius Pulcher, because on this night in 62 BCE, there was a person in disguise. Some people think that this disguise was a harp musician, whatever. Somehow, Publius Clodius Pulcher got into the Bona celebration in the palace of the Pontifex Maximus, where the family of the Pontifex Maximus and these Vestal Virgins and all these important people of Rome were. Now, at the time, the Pontifex Maximus was none other than Julius Caesar. Yep, that's right. Besides being just a genius military leader and a dictator in the future, he was also one of the highest priests of Rome. And because he was the Pontifex Maximus, that means at this party, Julius Caesar's mother and wife were there. And the wife is the really important figure, because rumors spread after this happened, because Claudius was discovered. He didn't get away with it. He was found out. All hell did break loose in Rome. And a rumor spread that Claudius was there to seduce Pompeia, Julius Caesar's second wife. So, because of this, Julius Caesar, amidst the scandal, Julius Caesar said one of his famous lines, saying something to the effect of, the wife of Caesar has to be above reproach or above suspicion, and so he divorced her. Even though Caesar had just divorced his wife, he didn't press any charges against Claudius. In Rome, however, there were much more poignant people who were sticklers for the rules, and of course, if you know Roman history, you know probably one of these people, at least that I'm talking about. Cicero. Cicero, one of those people who are always about preserving the Republic and upholding its honor and dignity and all that. He seems to be the consensus of the Romans in his time and after his time that, Cicero was the best speaker of Rome. But Cicero brought Claudius to court and put him on trial for sacrilege or something of that effect, for breaking the rules of the religious ceremony. And he thought it was such a clear case, such a cut and dry court trial that he didn't prepare much. And because of that, Claudius was able just to bribe his way out. Because Claudius was able to bribe his way out, Cicero just hated the man. And because Cicero in court was bad-mouthing him, spreading all sorts of bad ideas and slanders, or probably true, so they weren't really slanders, they were just accurate descriptions of this guy. But because his name was besmirched by Cicero, Claudius hated Cicero in return. Julius Caesar, however, he saw Claudius as a tool, as a weapon, as someone he could use to gain more support with the masses and to also beat down the triumvirate partners of Crassus and Pompey, as well as putting an anchor, shackling Cicero and Cato and other statesmen that could thwart his plans back in the Senate. To see the character of Publius Clodius Pulcher, all you have to do is look at the man's name. Publius Clodius Pulcher. Specifically, look at that middle name. It's spelled with an O. Clodius. That's not the usual way it's spelled. The usual Claudius has the AU. Publius Clodius Pulcher, though, didn't want to be that way. He didn't want to be traditional. He didn't want to be the normal, bland version of Claudius. There is a new term in the English language that has some applicability to this character, Publius Clodius Pulcher. I think it's safe to assume that this guy was a hipster. He was doing things counterculture in new ways, in just strange, odd, unique ways. And they annoyed the Senate and the elites, but the masses loved him for it. And so, his name is a perfect example of that. Didn't want to have the AU, so he changed it just to an O to try something new and different. And so, Caesar saw this type of person as a perfect go-between between him and the people, and also a tool to turn the masses against the senators in Rome, or his partners in the triumvirate, Crassus and Pompey. He could do that by sending his little goon, Publius Clodius Pulcher, out to stir up the masses against these people. So, remember, at this time, Caesar was either in Spain or going to Gaul, doing his wars over there, building up his name, his honor, his glory, getting new wealth, preparing his troops for the future civil war to come. So while Caesar was off at war doing those things, he had Publius Clodius Pulcher back in Rome. By 59 BCE, Claudius was definitely in the employ of Julius Caesar. While Caesar was off at war, Claudius did one of those weird things that the masses loved him for. He had been a patrician, one of the Roman elites, one of the higher members of the social ladder, but while Julius Caesar was away, to gain more power in the Senate and the governing body, Claudius was adopted into a plebeian family. Claudius had been a patrician, but by being adopted into a plebeian family, he himself became a plebeian. So he descended in rank, but gained more power because soon after he was elected tribune of the plebs. And that job, it gave him veto power. After Claudius became a tribune, he went to work attacking and suppressing Caesar's enemies, and he was spectacular in this. He had Cicero exiled, he had Cato sent to Cyprus to oversee the annexation of that island. He had Pompey, even though Pompey wasn't technically Caesar's enemy yet, and Caesar probably didn't want this to happen, but still, he had Pompey put under house arrest after an attempted assassination. assassination didn't work, but he was able to, after that, follow it up with putting this military genius under house arrest in Rome, which that's a pretty spectacular feat. But because of this attempted assassination and this house arrest, Pompey had Cicero brought back from exile, and then that caused Claudius to be pushed off his momentum. Things evened out a little bit. The longer Caesar was away, the more crazy Claudius got. He went from being just a disruptor, an agent, a middleman, to being just a gang leader. Claudius's antics got so bad that he was eventually kicked out of the Senate. And it's not too hard to see why he would be kicked out of the Senate, because some of the things he did was looting and burning the senators' houses. So it's easy to see why he would be kicked out of the Senate. All of the chaos that Claudius was wrecking and spreading and just filling Rome with, it lasted for a very long time. It lasted until around 52 BCE, and that's, to put it in context, Pompey's wife, Julius Caesar's daughter, she had already died. Crassus had already been killed in Parthia, over in the Middle East. And by the time Claudius died in 52 BCE, Caesar had only around a year left in his wars in Gaul. But if you think that Claudius's death would be out of character with the rest of his life, if his death would be bland, boring, not unique, or anything like that, then you are not going to be disappointed, because his death, just like the rest of his life, is spectacular. It's just weird and bizarre. The account of Claudius's death goes like this. He was returning home to Rome around 52 BCE along the Appian Way. But while he was returning home, he saw another person on the road. But this person wasn't just an average, everyday Roman. No, the guy was a tribune and a gang leader, but even worse, the man was a rival gang leader. And to make the situation even more just chaotic, both of these gang leaders, had armed escorts. They might have been mercenaries or gang members, but we don't really know. But as it usually happens, when two opposing charismatic figures meet, some words were exchanged. Maybe joking, maybe an argument, or just, stares. Who knows? But the people got into some exchange. And because of that, the forces started fighting. And before you think that Claudius was injured or killed or maimed or whatever by just a normal attack, the account says that he was taken down by a javelin throw by a former gladiator. Now, if that's not one of the weird ways to die, then, man. But Claudius, he didn't die from that. He made it to an inn, or his mercenaries, whoever was with him, pulled him back to an inn where they were going to treat his wound, the javelin throw. But after he arrived at the inn, this other leader named T. Annius Milo, he arrived at the inn and finished the job. Totally killed Publius Clodius Pulcher. The man was dead. The hero of the people, the trickster, prankster, ancient Roman hipster, the man was dead. But that's not where the story ends. The people back in Rome who loved this guy, remember, he was a tool for Caesar because the people just absolutely fawned over him. They loved him. He was the weirdest, most humiliating person for these elites, and the people loved him for it. The senators hated him, but the masses loved Claudius. And so when they heard of this man's death, when they heard that Claudius was killed along the Appian Way, the people in Rome rioted. They burned down houses of senators and just went totally crazy. And Pompey had to be drawn out to put down this riot. And when T. Annius Milo returned to Rome, none other than Cicero had him acquitted. So it comes full circle. All the people that Claudius attacked or suppressed were a part of either, putting down the rioters or acquitting Milo and all that stuff. But it didn't even matter that all of these people suppressed and attacked and humiliated by Claudius, it didn't matter that they had their revenge, because Claudius had done his job perfectly, even if he didn't know he was doing it. He had caused so much chaos, so much just tumultuous, weird things in Rome, that Caesar was able to do his job in Gaul. And he had about only 1 year left of it. Well, looking back on it, Caesar probably didn't know, but he had only around a year left that he would spend in Gaul, and he would return to Rome, and then this civil war would happen. So, Claudius met his end, but Caesar had enough time. But that's the story of Claudius Pulcher, one of the weirdest, strangest, oddest, most bizarre figures from Rome. But there is a final piece to the story. The inn where Claudius had been assassinated, where after he had been hit by a javelin, he went to this place to be bandaged, and Milo followed him and had him killed. That inn was near a shrine or a temple or some sacred site of the good goddess, Bona, the patron goddess of the Bona, that festival that he had infiltrated where he wasn't supposed to, because it was an all-women's ceremony festival gathering, and had caused Caesar's wife to be scandalized, and Caesar had divorced her. So it all comes back full circle, which makes you wonder if it was just later augmented and made into a legend. So who knows exactly how much of it is true, but man, it's a good story. And I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.